Today in Algebra 1B, we're going to work on our review for the Chapter 10 test, which is focused on the quadratic functions. So let's take a look at our first problem. On number 1, it says identify the vertex of the graph and tell whether it's a minimum or a maximum. So by looking at this, I can see this part right here is going to be the top of this quadratic graph, which means that first of all, this point right here is the vertex. That vertex point, its ordered pair would be 0, -1. And because it's kind of the top of our heap here, it's also going to be a maximum. So that means that down here, C is going to be my answer. Let's look at our next one. A parabola blank has an axis of symmetry. Now, first of all, axis of symmetry and line of symmetry are the same thing. So when they're talking about this, it always has a line of symmetry. Always, every time. So it will always have whatever my graph is, and I will always have some kind of line of symmetry that goes down the middle that cuts it in half, no matter what. So, okay, first two problems pretty easy. Second one, graph this and label the axis of symmetry and the vertex point. So first of all, my job is to identify A, B, and C. So A is -2, B is -2, and C is -1. So just from looking at that information, I know because A is -2 that it opens down. I also know it has a y-intercept of -1. So just looking at that and looking at these three pictures here, first of all, it can't be C because C doesn't open down. Pretty good. I have to have a y-intercept of -1. I can see on all of these so far they have a y-intercept of -1. So I'm down to, it could be A, B, or D for my answer. So let's actually start to calculate. First thing we need to do is our line of symmetry. So line of symmetry is x equals -b over 2a. So on this one, -b means the opposite of b. So the opposite of -2 would be +2. And my a value is -2. Which means it's end up being 2 over -4, which is 1 over -2. So my line of symmetry is x equals -0.5. Okay, if we change that half. So just looking at that, if I look at my graphs, can't be D because this part should be negative and it's not. So now I'm down to A or B. Okay, so now let's go through and find our vertex point. So to find my vertex point, I know that -0.5 has to be the x value. So now my job is to find the y value. And basically my equation is y equals -2x squared minus 2x minus 1. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit so I can have some room to solve here. So it's going to be y equals -2 parentheses -0.5 squared minus 2 parentheses -0.5 minus 1. And then my job really is to take this part and put it in my calculator. So if I go start calculating, so -2 parentheses -0.5 squared minus 2 parentheses -0.5 minus 1 will give me -0.5. Oh, sorry. Need a pen there. So y equals -0.5. So if I look at these two, this is wrong, so that means B's got to be my answer. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this graph as far as finding your line of symmetry and that kind of stuff. And you do have to be really careful that you actually identify A, B, and C, and identify things like opening up or down in your y-intercept right from the very beginning. It will save you work later on. Okay, let's look at our next one. Okay, solve this using square roots. Okay, so subtract 6. Then divide by 7. So x squared equals 1. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 1. So x equals plus or minus 1. So D is your answer. I'm going to tell you right now, people are going to answer B because they're not paying attention to that plus or minus. So don't forget that part. Okay, next one. Solve using the zero property. So this is where your parentheses are already done for you. Don't have to factor. All I have to do is split them. So 2x plus 2 equals 0. Or 5x minus 5 equals 0. Draw my line here. So subtract 2. So 2x equals negative 2. Divide by 2. X equals negative 1. Over here, add 5. Divide by 5. And I get x equals 1. So x equals plus or minus 1, or this. Either one's okay. So back on my problem. Oops. Don't know exactly what I did there, but let me fix it. So if I go back up to my problem, now remember this first one that I solved was negative 1. So I'm looking for x equals negative 1 or x equals 1. So that means that this B would be my answer. Okay, here's the next one. Again, using the zero property. So I'm going to take these two and separate them. So negative 8n equals 0, or 10n minus 1 equals 0. Draw my line. So n equals 0, or if I add 1, divide by 10, n equals 1/10. So let's go back up here and look. So my answer on this one would be B. Okay, now this is one that's going to require us to solve by factoring. So z squared minus 6z minus 27 equals 0. So if it's negative, negative, that means it's case 3. Difference of negative 6, and I'm going to factor 27. Now, if this is case 3, then one of these is going to be plus, and one of these is going to be minus. Now, if I look at this pairing down here, this one's the one that's going to give me a difference of 6. Since the 6 is negative, the negative is going to go with the 9, and the plus is going to go with the 3, which is going to help me with placement. Then, once you get here, then it is taking them and separating them and solving. So z equals negative 3, or z equals 9. So let's go back and look. So z equals -3, z equals 9. So my answer is going to be C. Okay, again, solve by factoring. Now this one's a little different though because it's missing a value. So the most I can do is take the greatest common factor of C out. So if I do, that leaves me one C here and a 4 here. So now my job is just to separate those. So good thing is this one's already done. Yippee. Okay, second one, add 4. So you get C equals 4. So C equals 0 or C equals 4. So my answer is going to be C. Okay, next one. Use the quadratic formula to solve this problem. So first of all, somewhat of an issue because there's no 0. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So 5y squared minus 8y minus 2 equals 0. So A is 5, B is -8, and C is -2. Now this is going to be a y equals instead of x equals equation because of the way this is written out. And then I'm going to start plugging stuff in. So if I go to plug stuff in, I'm going to set up my problem with everything except the A, B, and C in it. So my A value is 5, C is -2, B is -8, the opposite of that would be +8. So let's see, it's going to be 8 out here. Figure out what the square root is in a minute, but on the bottom it's going to be 10. And my job is to take that part underneath the square root and I'm going to plug it in my calculator. So parentheses -8 squared minus 4, parentheses 5, parentheses -2. And I end up with that one with 104, which again is not a prime number. So because it's not prime, one time through I'm going to have to add. One time through I'm going to have to subtract. Now I want to bring your attention to one thing. On this problem it said round to the nearest hundredth, which means that on these problems I can't go more than 2 decimal places. So if I put the first one in, 8 plus the square root of 104, then hit enter, divide by 10, I'm going to end up with 1.819, keeps going, so I'm going to round to 8.12. Then the other one, 8 minus the square root of 104, divided by 10, is going to give me -0.2198, keeps going. So on this one, I'm going to round to -2.2. So let's go check ourselves up here. Okay, so 1.8, -0.2, this is the only one that it would be. Okay, and this one, use any method. So first of all, if I'm going to solve this, divide both sides by 11. So x squared equals 8 over 11. And if it were me, I would just leave the whole thing as 8 over 11 and do it underneath the square root. So if I do the square root and do 8 divided by 11 and close my parentheses, I would end up with plus or minus 0.85. Means my answers is going to be D.